Welcome, everybody. I'm Mark Peter Davis, Managing Partner of Interplay. I'm on a mission to help entrepreneurs advance society, and this podcast is part of that effort. Today, we've got a Phuong segment. And for those who are new, Phuong gets in and crushes very tactical ways of building businesses. And so there's a lot of little wisdom in this, and I hope it's useful to you. Enjoy. All right, Phuong, good to see you.
Hi, Mark. What's going on?
Usual back-to-back grind, but I love it. You know that.
You feed off of that.
Do
you
I?
feed off the daily grind.
I used to debate. I'm originally from LA, as you know, and I used to debate whether or not New York was the right fit, but it very much is. That's the pace.
I can't even see you in LA.
Yeah, nor can I at this point. What do we got today? What's going on?
All right. So today we're going to talk about a common startup lesson that I think is pretty wide known in the community, but I'm often surprised by how many founders I come across who either don't follow it or don't really know what it means. So a few years ago, Paul Graham, the founder of Y Combinator, popularized the concept of doing things that don't scale, doing that early on in a business. It's one of these things we take for granted because sometimes early on, you have no choice but to do things that don't scale because you don't have the money or the resources. But what does it mean to do it with intentionality? And also, why would you want to do things that don't scale when you're trying to scale? So first, let's talk about what it means. I think there's a common misconception that when you launch a product or a startup, it either works or it doesn't, right? Customers either flock to you or they don't. But that's not true. Most startups that work, they work because their founders make them work. They're on the ground, they're cranking the engine, they're doing things manually until they can reach a critical mass, and then the flywheel sets in. But how do you do that? And why? Let's go through some of the common reasons. So the first reason why you would want to do this is to acquire and build relationships with customers. So, if you're a more established company, you can acquire customers by turning on a digital marketing campaign, right? You sit at your desk, you send out emails, social media, and Google ads, and then you watch the customers come rolling in. For startups, that's not enough. First of all, it takes a lot of time and money to get traction in those channels, especially early on. And then secondly, it keeps you too far removed from your customers. So let's look at an example. When Seamless first launched, their founders contacted law firms in New York, asked for their lunch orders, then placed the orders at the restaurants, and then oversaw the delivery. Why did they do that? First, it allowed them to get their first customers for free, which is an attractive proposition. It also created a direct relationship with their customers and their suppliers, where they gained a deep understanding of the pain points and the preferences. And then they use this information to really build out their product to address the needs of both sides of the marketplace. And then it also allowed them to deliver this amazing experience early on to these early adopters and created a group of customers that love them, vouched for them, and were early evangelists for them. And I think a small group of this kind of customer is much more valuable early on than a larger group of customers that just kind of like you. Secondly, doing things that don't scale allows you to test concepts before you invest in them. So this allows you to delay complexities until you've validated customer needs and demand. So here's another example. I used to work with one of the founders of diapers.com, which was an e-commerce site that sold diapers and other baby products with super fast shipping. The company was later sold to Amazon, I think, for like $1 billion. So in the early days, one of the founders told me this story. Before building out their supply chain, they would go to Costco and buy huge amounts of diapers at retail and sold them at a loss to their customers, and they often delivered it themselves. They had this funny story where they got to know the Brooklyn Costco so well that the manager would call them directly when a shipment arrived, and then the store associates would unload the inventory directly from the Costco trucks onto the founder's trucks, which I thought was hilarious. And then when they started getting more and more orders where they could no longer keep up with demand this way, they knew they were onto something. So this operating at a loss is definitely not scalable, but it did allow them to test their idea before they invested their resources into building out a really complex supply chain. And then lastly, doing things that don't scale allows you to effectively iterate on your product. So if you're sitting at your desk, not directly seeing how customers are using your product, how do you know what to do to make it better? Manual process allow for you to rapidly iterate, right? Founders can quickly test hypotheses, gather feedback, and make improvements based on real world interactions. So last example, when Airbnb first launched in New York, they did terribly. The founders hypothesized that it was because the images on the postings were not compelling. People were just taking terrible pictures of their apartments on their phones. So it's not surprising that no one wanted to book those places. So what the team did was they rented a high quality camera and went door to door through the city, taking pictures of as many spaces as they could. So with these new postings, they tripled their bookings. And once they kind of had that feedback, they actually created a photo service that allowed hosts to hire a professional photographer, which led them to grow their number of listings to 13,000 in just a couple of years. So, just another example of how keeping close to the process helps you really iterate and perfect your product. So, doing things that don't scale is about prioritizing learning and validation and building relationships over rapid growth. By putting in this work manually to do the stuff early on, you can lay a foundation for creating processes and products that eventually do scale into long-term growth.
I love this topic. And I want to add even one more reason why I think this is super important. It's kind of the undercover boss concept, right?
Yes.
If you've never been on the front line.
This is not the first time you've referenced that show on this podcast, by the way.
No comment. If you've never been on the front line, it's really hard to manage the ship once you have this big pyramid and mid-level management and everything else. So for management, really powerful to get your hands dirty, learn the nuances.
Yeah.
And it changes how you build your team, right? People will come in and say, hey, I need to hire a salesperson because I'm going to build this company. Well, salespeople come in different flavors, right? There's enterprise sales where it's kind of slow in relationship. There's more transactional styles. And people are better at different types of skills and different approaches. So really being in the fight for a while, even if it delays scaling the business, increases the odds of success for all the reasons you've said.
Yeah, fully agree. I mean, I think there's the idea of like founders making those first few sales themselves, like first 10 sales. I used to, spend 5 hours of my day, directly taking customer service calls, like checking on people's orders, manually delivering them if they were in New York City. So, and that really kind of you're on the front lines. You understand what people are directly saying about your products.
This is a super important topic. Thank you for covering this, Phuong.
Yeah, thank you. See you next time.